Hello everybody, welcome back. The Shadow of the Erdtree DLC has been out for a few weeks, is kicking butt left and right, and it revived the conversation about how challenging the game is. Every time From Software makes a new popular release, the conversation gets restarted and posts start flying everywhere about the topic. And it makes sense, because they are one of the few game developers that are actively pushing the envelope in that regard. Each new release is an opportunity to come up with new ways to put the player in high pressure situations that must be overcome in order to progress. But while the games they make are filled to the brim with those, can they really be considered to be challenging? My personal experience with these type of games is that they never really challenged me in any particular fashion. Now, I'm not saying I had an easy time playing them. On the contrary, it takes me quite a bit to clear them. But I never felt truly tested in any particular way, which is possibly my hot take in this regard, that generally speaking, there ain't no challenge in video games. To elaborate on that, let's make use of the Blackout Knight. Found incredibly early into the DLC, this Berserk reference is an analog to the Tree Sentinel, found similarly early in the base game. They both are notable obstacles that the player encounters super early, and as such they are quickly presented with a choice: avoid it and maybe return to it later, or challenge it head on and die a lot. On paper this makes sense, since it's an enemy that is designed to be a wall in the middle of the road that the player has to deal with. Or not, since you could ignore it until you get stronger and perhaps have an easier time dealing with it. I think they are meant to try to teach a lesson in how to approach the game. That is, if an enemy is too much for you, you can leave it to get stronger and then tackle it again. Unfortunately, when I look at it from a challenger perspective, I found that the lesson doesn't land quite effectively. Let's say that you decide to face it head on. What the challenge ends up being is that you are facing a very strong adversary when you're supposed to be at your weakest. Which is fine conceptually, but what exactly is being challenged here? The player being at his weakest means that undertaking it guarantees a lot of attempts will be necessary, for whatever reason. Learning patterns, dodge timing, what whiffs, attack windows, among other things, can cause respawns as you learn the encounter. On the other hand, you can forego the combat and just move on to other areas, claim other victories, and get stronger. This includes finding better gear and upgrading your preferred weapon so as to trounce the bloke later on, or at least give yourself an easier time. But that raises the question of why was it there in the first place, if the idea is not to interact with it until you're strong enough. Not to mention that that is not a lesson that gets a lot of mileage, since as the game progresses there are bosses that simply can't be avoided, and the whole farm to get stronger approach stops being practical after certain levels due to the never increasing time investment it will require. Which leads me to my next point, and that is how they seem to center on making the player fail numerous times until you eventually succeed. And going back to the Tree Sentinel and the Blackout Knight, these are enemies that are incredibly difficult to take down at that point in the game, and as such it is very rare for anyone to overcome them on a first attempt. So your options are to either put it off until you feel strong enough to tackle it, or go at it when you get there, and when you fail, you go at it again, and again, and again, until the pesky HP bar goes to 0. But what's being tested here? Player death doesn't really carry any sort of penalty, so you can keep fighting them without any real limitation. Moreover, this raises an important question. At what point can you say that your struggles in a fight are due to a skill issue or due to being underleveled? Games like Elden Ring have a hard time offering a clear distinction between the two, since they want to constantly challenge you. For me, that reduces every struggle to simple iteration and exercising a lot of patience. And when every encounter can be resolved in the same way, can it really be said that there's a challenge there? Let's look at it from another perspective. If there's ever truly a magical moment in any particular encounter where I think that the player can truly be challenged, is when they reach an encounter for the first time. That is the moment when you get to show off whatever expertise and skill you might possess at that point in the game. Unfortunately, with how these type of games are made these days, whether or not you fail is not so much of a question but a certainty. The magic immediately disappears, replaced with a repetitive iteration until you complete the encounter. I think that at that point it ceases to be a challenge and transforms into a task, because you are developing the particular skill set needed to complete it and then you move on. Worse yet, since gaming is all about escalation, each new encounter needs to be superior to its predecessor, essentially resetting your progress, as it were. Since you have to go through the process of learning a skill set over and over again when you fail to overcome it on your first try. Combine that with increasing damage that is present in your progression, and you get a situation where each big encounter is virtually indistinguishable from one another, since no matter what, the learning process repeats itself. This culminates in the expectations that each challenge demands the same thing: non-stop maximal performance, or get good until you reach that point. So how can a game fulfill its challenging criteria when it's constantly demanding the player the same thing at all stages of the game? This is why I think that video games can't ever be challenging, because ultimately the player isn't being tested, but rather given a long list of tasks that must be done in order to complete a game. And if you immediately thought that that is what you do in all games anyways, then you can probably appreciate where I'm coming from. At the end of the day, this is a very subjective topic that can lead to some very interesting conversations, since people dive into these games for many reasons, and might derive satisfaction from them in just as many ways. It also helps them to be very memorable, since the process of overcoming them can easily leave its mark. Part of the reason why Elden Ring is considered a masterpiece is how people have strong memories tied to the game due to all the dedication it required. But what do you guys think about the challenge in video games? Do you believe they challenge you in any particular way? Let me know down in the comments below. Thanks you all for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. Take care, stay hydrated, and see you all later.